Raising the river is one of the highest leverage nodes in poker, partly because it happens in big pots and partly because it's so easy to get wrong. So in this video, I'm going to walk through 5 hands where I bluff raised the river. We'll go through each of them in the Drive HUD replayer first, and then jump into GTO Wizard to explore what our raising strategies and combo selection should look like in each river spot. And at the end of the video, I'll share some heuristics you can use when deciding which hands to bluff raise with on the river. In a few of these hands, the solver agrees with the bluff raise, but in others, it turns out we should actually just be calling or folding. So let's start with the first one. This is the spot that we're going to look at, but let's rewind and see how we got here. Okay, so this is from 10-20 no limit. All of these hands are going to be from either 5-10 or 10-20, except for the second one, I believe. But anyway, cutoff opens to 2.5x here, and we call on the button with ace-jack offsuit. And we get a king, queen, queen rainbow board. Opponent goes for b40, it looks like, and we choose to call. Turn is the 3 of hearts. Opponent goes b40 again. I think against this small of a size, we need to be continuing again. So I go for the call. And the river is the 9 of diamonds. And once again, my opponent goes b40, it looks like. So we definitely get here with a fair amount of pretty strong hands. And I thought I wanted 2 raise sizes here. So for value, I generally jam with boats and maybe raise something like 75% pot with my straights. And so I thought I wanted a pair blocker to include in my bluff jamming range, maybe something like 10-9 suited, and thought this would be a pretty good combo to sometimes mix into my smaller raise size range since we block Jack-10, and we also potentially block some ace-queen, ace-king combos that our opponent could play this way for value. So I rolled high and went for it this time, and my opponent folded. Let's see what the solver thinks. Okay, so opponent goes b40 here, and we call. Turn is the 3 of hearts. Looks like preferred sizing is b67, but we will put in b40 since that's what my opponent did. And yeah, it looks like ace-jack is pretty much pure continuing here. And worth noting, we still do have king-queen that's calling, jack-10 that's calling. So we call, and river is the 9 of diamonds. And once again, our opponent goes b40. Out of position sizing scheme makes sense, again, because we are still uncapped in this node. But anyway, so yeah, it looks like we do get 2 raise sizes here, an all-in and a R75 size. I think value range is somewhat intuitive. We are mostly jamming with our king-queen combos, but mixing in the smaller raise size some of the time to keep that size uncapped. Pretty much pure mixing with our queen 9s for value, and our pocket 9s usually jamming on blocking trips, which is kind of nice. And then if we look at the straights that we get here with, they mostly go in the smaller raise size. Now let's take a look at where our bluffs are coming from. If we look at ace-jack, it looks like it does get in there a bit. I happen to have the club diamond combo, which barely ever raises. So even though I rolled high, I was probably overdoing it here. And if we take a look at some stuff that raises at a higher frequency, basically a lot of our pocket 4s, pocket 5s, some pocket 6s that we get here with. And then if we take a look at, yeah, 10-9 gets in there sometimes, Jack-9 gets in there sometimes as well. These combos make a lot of sense because obviously they block boats and block straights. So yeah, kind of a couple things to note here. First of all, it is a common theme that almost nothing ever pure bluff raises river, just because that will lead to too many bluff raises. And so we do kind of have to randomize if we're playing a good opponent. And most combos that do end up bluff raising are low frequency. But here, I think I was missing out on the fact that these low pocket pairs do make a higher frequency bluff raise than ace-jack specifically. And let's take a look at why that might be. If we look at our opponent's bet continue range, it does contain some queen-jack, so having a jack is a little bit nice for that reason. However, a lot of their bet fold range contains an ace. So I know a lot of these are like slivers, but they really add up, especially when we get up to the ace-10, ace-jack, ace-king. And so I actually think unblocking an ace is pretty nice for that reason. Even some ace-queen becomes indifferent against our raise, which I was not exactly anticipating. And Again, even though they can have some queen jacks in their range, some of their bet fold range also contains a jack. And so I think we would rather just unblock an ace by having these low pocket pairs than including a combo like ace jack. So that makes sense and gives me some more to think about. And let's move on to the second hand. Okay, so this hand was actually from the 500 NL play and explain video that I did not too long ago. So feel free to check that out. But anyway, in this spot, the hijack opens and we flat the button with pocket fours and the big blind defends. We see a 10-3-3 two-tone board with two spades. It checks to us. I decide to occasionally bet fours with a spade, and so I rolled high and went for a B25 here. Big blind calls and the hijack folds. We see a king of diamonds turn. There are some configurations where I would be inclined to barrel a combo like this, but I don't think this is one of them, so I decided to just pure check back. And the river is the queen of spades. And here our opponent goes B33, it looks like. And at this point, my thought process was something like, I can certainly get here with some flushes that I want to raise for value. And so I was trying to think of what bluffs I could have in my raising range, which certainly want to contain a single spade. And I couldn't think of any board pair blockers that have a spade that would be worth raising, because I think having a king would be just too strong. Something like king jack offsuit we could potentially get here this way. And, you know, something like ace jack offsuit with a spade is now a straight, so that can't bluff raise. So I decided that I had to occasionally turn these low pocket pairs into bluffs, most likely. So again, I rolled for a raise and went for it, and my opponent folded. And let's see what the solver thinks about this one. Okay, here I set up a multi-way sim, and once it checks to us, if we look at our pocket fours, they tend to pretty often bet with a spade, but actually with no heart. And I did have spade heart, and probably the reason for this is because when we do bet, our opponents can continue with ace four of hearts, and so unblocking that is helpful just because we push equity from a combo like that. Whereas when we do have spade and a heart, we obviously block ace four of hearts, and so we can be more inclined to just check back. So that's a somewhat important little detail that I missed in this hand, but we do decide to bet, and the big blind called and the hijack folded. Turn was the king of diamonds, and it checks to us again. It does look like pocket fours, pretty much just pure check back here, so we check. The river was the queen of spades. We are going to have to tinker with out of position's bet sizes here, because since it was a multi-way sim, Wizard just defaults to B66 for every player for every node. So let's maybe give them a B33 size, which is what they played. Maybe let's give them a B100 size and an all-in. So they go B33. And if we take a look at our pocket four combos, pretty interesting here. The spade heart combos that we do happen to get here with, again, which is the combo that we have, is the combo that likes to mix in a good amount of raises. And it looks like the other ones kind of just give up. If we look at where some of our other bluff raises are coming from, because I think the value range is pretty obvious. I guess some fringe combos of sixes with a spade and sevens with a spade. Jack nine is obviously a straight, so that's a value raise. I guess some pocket nines with a spade. So yeah, again, it's a lot of mixing with the combos that we can get here with that contain a spade. I was probably kind of lucky to have the exact combo that I did here. But yeah, I think nothing too outside of ordinary besides that. And let's just check out the next hand. Okay, here's a spot where early position raises to 2.2. I decide to flat here. I think this is perfectly fine at probably 500 NL plus. I would probably play 3-better fold at smaller stakes just because of rate considerations. But anyway, everyone else folds, and we get to a queen jack 4 rainbow flop. Out of position goes like B30 here, and I think this is a pretty straightforward call. Here they go for B150, which I think is a reasonable size to use. I thought this was close-ish because we do have plenty of better stuff here, including better queen X and straight draws and flush draws and so on, but I chose to call again. And the river is the 8 of hearts, and my opponent goes B75. This is a spot that I thought I could get here with some sets and maybe a couple combos of 10-9 suited. And so, blocking a queen, our opponent could potentially bet call with something like ace queen or obviously pocket queens or queen jack, and obviously blocking the straight as well. I decided to turn this into a bluff raise and go all in with it. And my opponent here thought for a while and folded. Let's look at GTO Wizard now. Okay, low jack goes b30, and we can mix in some raises, it looks like, with queen 10 occasionally, but we go for a call. Turns the 3 of diamonds, and it looks like the solver gives them a b66 size, but let's put in b150. Yeah, this is a perfectly fine size to use. And interestingly here, we can turn this into a bluff raise on the turn some of the time, but when we don't, we should actually just be folding it. So I guess this is just because out of position has such a big top of range advantage. And again, we have plenty of better stuff to continue with here. Even king jack looks to be a bit better because it has the overcard. And, absolute hand strength wise, it's basically identical because we're playing against a polar range. And then, yeah, obviously we have some sets, some ace queen, some straight draws with the king 10, and then even some flush draws with some ace 4, ace 5 of diamonds. So good to kind of recalibrate here and start folding my weaker queen X combos here most of the time. But let's just node lock for some occasional calls. And the river is the 8 of hearts. And I believe out of position's actual size was 75% pot here, so let's just put that in. And okay, so if we look at our raising range here, we obviously have 2 pair for value and our sets and the straights that we do get here with. And then, yeah, if we look at our combo queen 10, hearts actually almost pure jams when we do get here with hearts. And the other combos can mix raises. Again, we shouldn't really get here, but if we do, which I obviously did, it is good to kind of turn it into a bluff and raise. Even jack 10 of diamonds is maybe a little bit surprising because potentially some of their bluffs could include like ace 10 of diamonds, although maybe they just don't bluff with that combo. We can take a look. Ace 10 of diamonds occasionally does, but when they have it, they more often tend to just go all in as a bluff. So yeah, I guess blocking the 10 of diamonds is not really a big deal there. And yeah, I mean, mixing in some fringe 5-4 suited that I guess you can call with preflop occasionally as well. So good to see that at least a bluff raise is the highest EV play with my combo here, but again, looks like folding the turn or bluff raising the turn is a little bit better. One of the heuristics that I was actually going to mention at the end of the video is that as we move towards the end of the hand, we want to use hands with more and more showdown value in our bluff raising range. So for instance, our bluff raising range on the flop will often have little to no showdown value. On the turn, we want to start using some more showdown value with our bluff raises. And then on the river, often our bluff raises are coming from hands that are or might seem like plus EV calls, but they are equal or more plus EV to turn into a raise. So I do think this is kind of a good example of that. On the turn, to me, it seemed like queen 10 had, too much showdown value to be bluffing with, but it looks like in these positions, just because of how tight preflop ranges are, it does sort of make a good turn bluff raise candidate. And again, of course, if we do happen to get to the river with it, then it is a good river bluff raise candidate as well. So that was a good one to look at, and let's take a look at the next one. Okay, so these last 2 hands are heads up hands. I don't know how much heads up you play, but I do think it's valuable both for starting tables, and if you can just get action against a player that you have an edge against in heads up, that can be a great source of win rate. Anyway, it looks like we're like 227 bigs deep to start this hand. Button opens, we defend 6-5 offsuit, and we get a 10-7-6 board. Flop goes check, check. Turn goes check, check again. And river, I don't see any point in betting this combo, so I go for a check. And opponent goes b67, I think it looks like. And here I started thinking about my raising range. Because so much of our value range here comes from 2 pair with a 6, and so much of villain's bet call range is also 2 pair with a 6, I thought we wanted to look for 6x hands to bluff with, and so I rolled for a bluff raise with this one. So I go for the raise and they fold, and again, let's see what the solver thinks about this spot. Okay, so button wants a B158 size for their c-bet size, which is 3E here, but obviously that is going to be polar and they should usually be checking. So they check. The turn is the jack of spades. If we look at our 6-5 offsuit combos, which is what we have, it looks like we can occasionally mix in some probe bets for B67 with a spade. However, we choose to check and opponent checks back again. And the river is the ace of diamonds. Here, 6-5 is pure checking. And against a B67, let's take a look at our raising range. So what's interesting here is if we look at our combo 6-5 offsuit, they mostly fold and can kind of just mix in some calls to not be over folding. But if we look at where our bluff raises are coming from, it looks like they are coming from a 6, but we would rather have an 8 or a 9 or a king or a queen to go along with our 6. So I think what's happening is obviously all of those combos do block a straight because there are 2 straights possible here, king, queen, and 9-8. And so at first glance, it would seem that obviously we want to block a straight. I think blocking straights is valuable here, but not for the reason it might seem. And that's because our opponent probably never really has straights because they would have bet king, queen, and or 9-8 on a previous street. However, they are more likely to bet call with a straight blocker because we can still have straights in our range. And so I think it's more kind of valuable to have a straight blocker, not to block our opponent from having a straight, but from blocking our opponent from having the straight blocker, which could potentially make a good bluff catch in their situation. For instance, something like ace-8 could play this way for value and look to be calling against a raise. On top of that, if we look at their response against our raise here, a lot of their bet fold range actually contains a 5. So we see 10-5, both suited and offsuit combos are getting in there. Some queen-5, ace-5 is indifferent. A lot of these just weak 5x hands that mix in some bluffs. Also, a lot of their bet folds are going to contain a 4. We see like 4 deuce, 10-4, this kind of stuff, queen-4. Again, ace-4 is indifferent. So in addition to having sort of the straight and pair blocker properties of the bluff raises that looked good, so like the 9-6, the 8-6, the king-6, that kind of stuff, I think also unblocking a 5 and a 4 is good as well. So let's sort of verify this if we go back and look at our raising range again. If we look at the 6-4 combos, they call more often than they fold, it looks like, but they're pretty much never bluff raising because we don't really want to be blocking those bet folds with the 4. So I think this was valuable to look at because my sense that having a 6 as a good place to start was good, but we do want to go a bit deeper than that and fully try to think about what their bet continue range is going to be and what cards are more likely to block that and unblock that. Let's take a look at one more hand. Okay, this is another heads up spot. Here we open the button with 10-9 offsuit, big blind defends. I choose to go B40 here. You can play a bigger size, doesn't matter too much. And I'm definitely mixing this combo, but rolled for a bet. Opponent called. Turn, I decided to check back. And river, my opponent goes B25 here. And here, for kind of similar reasons that we've been exploring, I thought having a pair blocker and a straight blocker would kind of make this a nice bluff raise on the river. So I went for the raise and my opponent folded, but let's take a look in Wizard and see how we can refine this spot. Okay, so if we take a look at our 10-9 offsuit combos, they're pretty much pure mixing bets and checks. So we bet this time and opponent calls. The turn is the ace of spades. We go for an overbet with our turn c-bet size, but we pure check 10-9. And the river is the 8 of diamonds. Here my opponent went B25, which is a solver approved size. And yeah, let's take a look at our raising range here. We obviously have some straights that we can raise for value with Jack 10 and a little bit of 10-7. And we can certainly pick up 2 pair with the 8 and be raising some 8-6 combos, some 9-8 combos, Queen 8, stuff like that. Also, against a B25 size, it looks like some of the time ace-X just wants more money to go in the pot. So we can be kind of value raising with some of our ace-X some of the time as well. We're not going to get here with our stronger ace-X because those would have bet the turn. And so, the weaker ace-X that we get here with, we just want to put in a raise with sometimes. If we look at our combo, 10-9 offsuit, we just pure call and never raise here. So this was a mistake, and I think the reason is just because most of our 2-pair combos are going to contain an 8 since we checked back turn. And so we probably want to prioritize looking for bluff raises with our 8x hands over our 9x hands here, especially since a combo like 10-9 is so plus EV to just call with. So if we look at 10-8, for instance, which we can also get here with, we actually usually just raise. Also, we can look to 8-4, 8-3, 8-deuce. Having the straight blocker here is not nearly as valuable as having the rivered pair blocker. So I think that's a pretty cool heuristic to pull here, specifically in hands where turn goes check, check. You can sort of start to look for bluff raises if you river a weak-ish pair. Just because both players' 2-pair are going to often contain that card, and so blocking that card becomes a lot more important. And sort of another heuristic that you may have noticed by now is that we do often use combos that would often make a plus EV call, but we just need to mix them into a bluff raising range some of the time to support whatever our value range is. And sort of again, like I mentioned before, we're rarely going to want to turn pure air into a river bluff raise. More often it's going to be some sort of showdown value type stuff to look for, occasionally even turning top pair into a bluff raise in the right kind of situation. So I will wrap things up there. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you found this valuable at all, consider subscribing to the channel. I'll see you in the next video.